a lot of child development is really learning that I'm my own person as a child and you are your own person. And we might have different ideas, and that's okay. And we can negotiate and figure out how to be in the world together. It's sort of like repeat that whole experience over and over again. And so that begins with joint attention.
Joint attention is simply sharing attention and engagement with another human being, another caregiver. We think of this as being very important for subsequent development of theory of mind, which is when a child is simply using the information from others to inform their behavior. But it's also very important for social communication and language development. Joint attention can be broken down into these 3 discrete periods. And kind of when we talk about joint attention, we think about it as this collective set of behaviors. It begins with an infant, generally around 7 to 8 months of age, sharing attention with the caregiver on an object. Okay, it's very simple, very basic, but what you get is triadic gaze. So an infant who looks at the object, back at the caregiver, back at the object. Okay. Now, this is this pre-verbal communication about, what is going on with this object. Can you help me understand this? That quickly evolves into what we refer to as responding to joint attention around 9 to 10 months of age. And this is kind of classic, what we would think of as classic joint attention skills, when an adult caregiver is redirecting the attention of their child. And the infant is responding to the bid for joint attention. Okay, so this can happen a number of different ways. Oftentimes, parents will shift their gaze, turn their head, point, and vocalize, "Hey, look at that." Sometimes, as children develop more sophisticated responding to joint attention skills, they may do this with a very subtle cue. A caregiver may shift their gaze and turn their head, and the infant toddler will soon begin responding to this very subtle cue. And this is a very sophisticated form of responding to joint attention, something that we don't see until generally 15 to 18 months of age. Now, the third step in the progress, or in the process, is what we refer to as initiating joint attention. Now, this is when the child, him or herself, begins to initiate joint attention in order to redirect the attention of the caregiver. Okay? And this can take a couple of different forms. They can maybe just simply requesting, "Hey, there's the cookie jar. I would like one of those." Very important communicative gesture and pre-verbal communication. And then the most sophisticated, what people think of as the most sophisticated form of initiating joint attention, is when a child will initiate a bid for joint attention simply to share engagement. Okay? Simply to share attention. "Hey, I think that's cool. You should look at it, and let's share this moment on this object." Neither of us are going to get it. We're not going to touch it. We're just going to point. I'm going to point to the airplane because I like airplanes, and I think that you should share in this moment with me. Now, the psychology behind that is fairly sophisticated, and this is where we think of joint attention as having kind of the developmental roots for subsequent theory of mind. So when a child initiates joint attention to simply share engagement, the psychological ramifications of that are that the child is acknowledging that his or her visual system is different than the adult caregivers. But probably a bit more than that. Not only the visual system, but their mental state. And they have intentionality of their own. And so the idea is that in order for me to share something with you, I first acknowledge that your mind, your mental state, your visual system is separate from mine, and I'm going to have to redirect your attention to share engagement on this object. So that's kind of the psychology behind joint attention and why we think it's so important. It essentially represents the developmental roots of a child's ability to acknowledge that the other, the caregiver, can be an intentional agent. They have thoughts, they have beliefs, they have desires, they have emotions that are separate from the infant or toddler. And again, this is how we think of why theory of mind is so interesting, right? It's being able to use those inferences about the other's belief, mental state, affect, love, emotion, to guide behavior.
This is where it can be really fun to do the work because sometimes, work with parents and children, especially when there's chronic stress or toxic stress, exposure can be hard, but developing joint attention is really about finding joy and delight in the world together, and it doesn't have to require any toys. It doesn't have to require any money. It's really just about, can these two people look at things together and share an experience together? Really, it's about a kind of chatting all through your day with your baby and pointing at things and kind of getting excited about things, and then talking about even narrating your own internal experience. Whoa, I was startled by the sound of that airplane overhead. Do you see the airplane up in the sky? Do you hear it? All of those kinds of things. And it can be kind of fun. Your kiddo can become your buddy, kind of going through the world, learning about the world. And a big part of developing a healthy attachment, a secure attachment, is also for the parent and child to delight in each other, for the parent to delight in what the child is looking at and doing. And so I think social workers have a great opportunity to support that developmental capacity in a child with a foster parent or a parent by just talking about how important it is that they look at things together, and that the parent sort of tell a story about what it is they're doing together all day long. Now we're going to have a snack, and now we're getting in the car to go to the doctor, and oh, look, there's a bus. Oh, look, there's a stoplight. The stoplight's red. I mean, just very basic conversation. And also, it's very exciting, I think, for parents, and sort of relieving to know that it's just in these very everyday, ordinary experiences that they can support their child's development. They don't need to buy anything fancy or do anything special for it. They can just be thinking about their child and noticing what their child is looking at or anticipating what they might want to look at, talk about it with them, and together they're developing that their relationship, but also that child's ability to sort of think outside themselves, to take another perspective, to have language around what's happening in the world, all of those different things together, just in those very basic, simple experiences. I think describing ways to support joint attention in real time can be helpful. So not having it be sort of a teaching lesson for a parent, but just in the moment, noticing when a parent does that with their child and commenting on it and saying, did you know that you're really supporting their learning? And for a lot of parents, it's really about helping them get ready for school or helping them, get smarter and stronger every day. And so they don't need the term joint attention, but they can understand that when they, as a parent, can think about or notice something that their child is noticing, they're helping their child feel good about themselves. They're helping their child get a broader vocabulary, and they're just finding a way to have their own special relationship with their child. And so, if you're in a home visit, or you're in I'm thinking a home visit with a foster parent or a biological parent, or a time of reunion, or any of it, these are all opportunities when you see a parent joining with a child and looking at things of that age, just commenting on, oh, that's beautiful, you're supporting your child's brain, you're helping your child become a good friend to others later. This is the beginning, and you're doing it.
One aspect that we would be looking for in joint attention development in infants who have experienced multiple different environments is they may not be consistently receiving the same type of bids for joint attention from various caregivers. Now, we think of the joint attention system as quite resilient, quite robust. But I think that we don't know what variability in caregivers and the variability in how caregivers may elicit a bid for joint attention, how that varies may have subsequent effects on child development. So my expectation, though, would be this is something that we should talk to foster parents and caregivers about, continually trying to label objects in your environment and making sure that you are playing with your infant. This natural kind of play-based social interaction, there's going to be a lot of bids for shared attention and joint attention. So that would be the place where I would begin is play.
I think my advice would be to just make sure you, as a social worker, really personally understand how joint attention, theory of mind develop, so that you can notice when parents are supporting that or when a child is having a hard time with it. When you go in and you're thinking about a parent-child relationship or a foster parent and child relationship, can you, as a social worker, keep your child development lens on and look? Can that child do eye contact? Are they an engaging social child already who's going to already kind of be able to join with a foster parent? Or do you need, as a social worker, to kind of help coach that foster parent to not maybe feel rejected by that child, but to understand, you know what, you may need to go back with this child and just start delighting in the child's eyes and finding wonderful things to look at together, because then you'll build that relationship with the child, and the child will be able to get those skills. So knowing child development well enough that you can kind of make a fairly quick assessment of where is this child. And if after a while it's still, even a short time, it's still not coming online, it's time to make an assessment or refer for an assessment for, developmental assessment and even a mental health assessment. Eye contact and looking at things together, these very basic activities are really important in a child's development. And if you're not seeing it, and you can see that the foster parent or biological parent is really trying, figure out with a pediatrician and other developmental specialists how you can get the child some help.
It's very important that your child is spontaneously initiating eye contact and spontaneously makes gaze to your face to acquire information about what you're thinking or what you're up to. The other thing that you should be on the lookout for is times when your child is using gestures, using pointing gestures and other pre-verbal vocalizations maybe to initiate engagement or attention with you. How do they get your attention? Is it through eye contact? Is it through misbehaving? Is it through throwing something? Or are they approaching you, making eye contact and maybe taking your hand or using other gestures to engage with you? If children are not spontaneously initiating or engaging with you, this is something that we would think of as potentially concerning, especially if it happens over a long duration of time. There are a number of ways that the development of joint attention can go awry. In typically developing children, it comes on like clockwork. It's very predictable. So sharing attention between 7 and 8.5 or 9 months of age, responding to joint attention 9 to 11, initiating joint attention generally 11 to 13, 14 months of age. If we see that toddlers at that age are not spontaneously initiating joint attention, or a child is not meeting the milestones, this behavior, along with other behaviors in the child's kind of profile or repertoire, might be signs that or risks for later development of autism or some type of a social communicative disability, and would warrant follow-up testing and assessment.
If a parent or foster parent is noticing that their child is struggling with some joint attention for whatever reason, I think going back to the very beginning of seeing to what extent can the child tolerate some eye contact, even if it's very brief, millisecond type of eye contact. Can you sit next to them, kind of look and join them and look at something together? So that your attention is maybe on figures in a book or a puzzle. It sort of depends on what age they are, and you kind of want to think about what would be of interest to them at that particular age. But can you do both your job and help coach them through their job at the same time? Meaning, can you help a foster parent do the looking and the pointing job in maybe even a more exaggerated way than they would, and then help them invite a child to join them in that and say, here's the duck. Do you see the duck? Really kind of break down those skills to give the child the opportunity to do that. And the beautiful thing that often happens in development, at least from what I've observed, is that because those children are wired to have those parts of their brain and body develop, they kind of come online pretty quickly if they're what's called scaffolded or coached through those experiences. So it's almost like a coaching model with a social worker, with a parent or foster parent, and then a coaching model between the foster parent and the child, figuring out how can we practice this, how can we have fun with it, and then how can we build it into all of our routines. Can we build it into diapering or errand running or laundry or all of it? Like, how can we have fun times to do this? So I worked a long time ago with a kiddo who was a little over 4, and he was not able to tolerate eye contact with me when I first met him. He would come into a childcare setting and sort of sit in a ball in the corner. He had had a really difficult first number of years, had moved several times and was new to the area, but had gotten connected with this therapeutic program. And so I came in and I realized he couldn't do gaze following with me. He couldn't do joint attention with me. We really needed to start our work with me noticing him and him noticing me. And so I needed to, and him starting to realize that we could share eye contact for brief moments and it wouldn't hurt him. And so that's where I started with him, was just even from across the room noticing things. And when he would get up and, kind of reach for a toy or find something to do, I didn't even use language. I just was communicating with my eyes and my face with him, as you would with a 2-month-old who's just waking up to the world. And very quickly over time, as he started to feel safer in that environment, not just with me, but in the whole environment, and as his family life got more and more stable, he was able to make sort of leaps and bounds to the point where he was able to go beyond joint attention and ask for, look at me, watch me go down the slide, all of those things that you'd be expecting a 4-year-old to do. But he really we had to start with communicating through our eyes. And I always start with, especially with kids who've had exposure to toxic stress or chronic stress, is with eye contact and with thinking about how can we begin our relationship with our eyes and our faces, and how can I know you and see you with my eyes and my face in a way that doesn't feel threatening to you, and let you come to me, and how can we kind of begin that relationship dance together. And I think that understanding the development of joint attention, from gaze following to joint attention and to later theory of mind and executive functioning much later, if you go backwards and begin with the gaze following and eye contact, you can kind of repair some of those early experiences so that some of the future capacities can come online.